Okay, Boomer, what's up? It's the Culture Detective here, investigating your favorite albums, and today I had extra biology class after school, and I sort of left school at like almost 7 p.m., so I'm just gonna skip dinner, starve myself to death, and talk about this album. This is the latest album from the UK pop rock band Coldplay, and this album is called Everyday Life. Not a great album title, I have to admit. So Coldplay, if you have been a long-time subscriber to this channel, you know that I am a humongous, gigantic Coldplay fan. In fact, my first few albums reviews ever are all Coldplay reviews, and I have praised them very highly in the past. It is safe to say that Coldplay is one of the first few bands that got me into the whole music thing, and they are still a band that I respect. The last time they dropped an album, it's the year 2015 with the album A Head Full of Dreams, and they said that it would be their final album, and 4 years later in 2019, for some reason, they decided to drop this very unprecedentedly. And before I get into this album, I would like to go through a brief history of Coldplay for you, because the last time I talked about Coldplay, it's like 2.5 years ago. So, Coldplay, they started off with the album Parachutes, which is not a great album, but there are highlights on the album such as Don't Panic and Spies. A lot of people hate Coldplay in this world for some reason, which is kind of saddening to me, because Coldplay is a legitimate, passionate band with some really great song ideas, and a lot of people look at their hits and think, wow, they're all really corny and really bad. But you guys are missing the deep cuts. There are so many underrated Coldplay songs out there, and you just gotta listen to them. Of course, we have Don't Panic and Spies. Spies is such a great song. And then we have the album A Rush of Blood to the Head, which is my personal favorite Coldplay album, released in the year 2002. The track The Scientist is probably my favorite Coldplay song still, but we also have tracks like Amsterdam, Daylight, God Put a Smile Upon Your Face. Afterwards, we have the album X and Y, which takes on a more futuristic edge and also nostalgic edge. And there are tracks on that album like Square One, White Shadows, and Talk. And of course, the track Fix You is fantastic as well. In the year, I think 2009, they dropped Viva La Vida or Death and All His Friends, another friggin' fantastic album from Coldplay. I think I love all of the tracks on that album as well. We have tracks like Cemeteries of London and 42, and yes, the title track is catchy and fantastically written, and the album ending just leaves a strong impression in your heart, like something really dramatic is going on. Of course, Violet Hill and Strawberry Swing are amazing tracks as well. And yes, this is basically the first 4 albums that they ever put out, and I got this catalog box set, probably my favorite birthday gift that I've ever received. But come on, this is awesome. I've never actually touched this thing for years, but like just look at that, this is X and Y right here. X and Y, fantastic. A Rush of Blood to the Head. And while Parachutes is the soft and more tender album, A Rush of Blood to the Head just contains so much emotion, yet so much style and charisma. It's fantastic. And after these 4 albums, they started to explore into more poppier, more mainstream territory on the album Milo Xyloto, which is an album that I didn't like at first, but it really grew on me. The collaboration with Rihanna is not one of the better tracks on the album, in my opinion, but we have tracks like Hurts Like Heaven and Charlie Brown, which are fantastic. And then in the year 2014, they dropped their most underwhelming album, in my opinion, and that is Ghost Stories. It's kind of short, kind of sad, kind of subdued, even though we have tracks like Midnight, which I think is just stunning. And immediately afterwards, we have the album A Head Full of Dreams in the year 2015, which is probably the poppiest album that Coldplay had ever put out, with collaborations with Beyonce as well as Tove Lo. And I'm gonna be honest here, I don't think any of the songs on that album are terrible. But neither are any of the songs on that album great. It's just kinda in the middle, kind of middle brow, very mainstream, kinda commercial, overly produced. And then they just kinda stopped at that. And then years later, this year, apparently they went around the world in, I think, Mexico, Middle East, most definitely. They probably also went to Nigeria, and they had a lot of inspirations, and then they decided to make this album, Everyday Life. And it is actually a really pleasant surprise to see that this album isn't even more mainstream and commercial and poppy as their last album. They are actually not going towards that trend of just bloated, overproduced pop rock music, because they are obnoxious. But Coldplay keeps it simple, and I love that. And it's also a pretty pleasant surprise for me to hear that the songwriting on this album are actually pretty solid, even though they are not necessarily all that special or anything, which goes to my first critique of the album. This album doesn't sound special at all. None of the tracks on this album sound like something I've never heard before, and I'm not really asking for anything experimental or leftist or artistic, but at least bring something new, something exciting, something engaging onto the table, other than bringing something familiar onto the table. And because of that, this album is just very harmless, kind of tame, kind of mild. It doesn't really have much in terms of personality or flavor or texture. But my biggest critique to the album is that this album is all over the place. It is a mess. On one track, Chris Martin tries on some bluesy jazz, soul. On another track, he goes country. On another track, he goes pop, rock. And then all of a sudden, he would jump over to some gospel for some reason. And another critique that I have for this album is that it sounds like a Chris Martin album instead of a Coldplay album. A bulk of the tracks on this album only feature Chris Martin's vocals and a bunch of other people, I guess, and sometimes just him alone. I would like to hear more of Guy Berryman, Will Champion, and Johnny Buckland. This album is separated into two parts, Sunrise and Sunset. And I'm going to be talking about the first part first, Sunrise. And of course, the album starts off with the track Sunrise, which is basically this 2 minute and 30 seconds long string section with some really nice, gorgeous, mysterious, surreal strings. Sounds like I'm in the middle of a very grand but also heavenly wedding, which is a pretty nice opener for the album. Even though it really leads up to nothing, it feels brief and I am confused. We have the second track, Church, which is one of the meatier cuts on the album. We get some sweet, harmless guitars and some light and chunky drums, which is actually pretty nice. However, there really isn't much in terms of chord progression on the track. The verses and the choruses, they sound similar, and there are moments on the track where the vocals are just muffled for some reason, which makes this track kinda uneasy. So I'm gonna give scores to basically all the tracks on the album, unless they are interludes, so I'm feeling a 6 on this one, 6 out of 10. And then afterwards, we have the track Trouble in Town, which is the first song on the album that I actually like. It has some sad, subdued pianos that are downtrodden, and also some subtle kick drums, which are really well produced for some reason. I actually kind of find that funny. But what I like about this track is that even though it feels very low key and quiet in the beginning, it does feel worrisome. There's this stress in the atmosphere of the track, which I really love. And then towards the end, the track explodes. The instrumentals swell to a very climactic ending. We get some wailing guitars, which are really fluid. And the drum beat on the track, again, they are kind of strange, but in a good way. In a way, it kind of reminds me of some sort of futuristic hip house production, like the soundtrack of Black Panther. Yeah, there is also a moment on the track where we get this vocal snippet, which is almost a little too loud for its own good. So that's one small critique. But other than that, I kind of like the sound of the track. I'm feeling an 8 out of 10. Strong 7 to a light 8 on this track alone. And then afterwards, we have the track Broken with capital B and capital E. But this track actually sounds more like an ode to the Lord than it is an ode to Brian Eno, unless Brian Eno is the Lord. And this is not even a Coldplay song. It's just Chris Martin, a piano, and a friggin' gospel soul choir singing this bluesy soul song with a really feel-good spirit to it. And while the song sounds pleasant, it sounds very happy and lively. Um, this song still sounds kind of tame, mild, not really that original, and I'm just feeling a 7 to a 6 out of 10 on this track. We have the track Daddy, which is one of the few very low-key ballads on the album. Not even ballad, it's just a very quiet, just very uneventful piano song. And Coldplay does that all the time, especially towards the end of their discography. Ever since Ghost Stories, Coldplay always makes these very low-key, subdued piano songs. Sort of this trying to be innocent and beautiful piano ballad. It's not really working for me. It's not really that beautiful of a track. And in fact, it's kind of boring. It's kind of boring of a song. I do kind of like the lyrics about, trying to bond with your father, but the songwriting on this track is just very lackluster. So I'm just kind of feeling a 3 to a 4 out of 10. And the first half ends off with WOTW/POTP, Wonders of the World, Power of the People. And it's such a weird track placement. This track is essentially a very organic recording of just Chris Martin and his guitars, just acoustic. And it's just this really sweet, nice little tune, and it's like 1.5 minutes long, and that's it. It honestly would have served better as the ending to the album, rather than being in the middle of the album. I guess it's kind of the ending of the first part, but still, it's a weird track placement, and it's not really all that great of a track either. Feeling a strong 4 to a 5 out of 10 on the track. And then we have the second part to the album, Sunset, and it kicks off with the track Arabesque, one of the lead-up singles to the album, and it's actually fantastic. I actually like this track a lot, even though this isn't like one of the best Coldplay tracks ever, and not even one of the best songs of the year. It's still kinda good. We get some flavorful, jangly guitars and bass. Finally, we can hear the bass, and we also get some really grand, rich horns on the track. There's even a saxophone solo in the middle of the track, which actually is pretty entertaining. We get some hushed vocals on the track, which is something that I'm not a fan of, but the ending to the track is incredibly ambitious, loud, grand, where Chris Martin screams on top of his lungs, "Same fucking blood," which is kind of cool because Chris Martin had never swore on a Coldplay song ever. The only time there's a swear word in a Coldplay song is the Jay-Z remix of Lovers in Japan, where he says shit. So this is a breakthrough, which is actually pretty cool. Yeah, feeling a light 9 on the track, maybe a strong 8 to a light 9 on the track, strong 8. Afterwards, the quality of the album takes a nosedive immediately with the track When I Need a Friend, which is a straight up gospel choir track. The kind of track, the kind of song, the kind of hymn that you would hear in a Catholic church. And I don't have a problem with the fact that this is a gospel choir track, but the fact that this track is in the middle of this album with no rhyme or reason whatsoever just kind of boggles me, especially at the end where there's suddenly this vocal snippet of this Mexican guy talking, which is kind of meaningful, but it's just weird. It's just weird. So yeah, 3 out of 10. And we have the track Guns as well, which is also not a Coldplay song. It's just a Chris Martin song. Chris Martin and his guitars, acoustic again, and this time it's a pretty wordy, hillbilly-esque country jam where Chris Martin talks about guns, gun violence in almost a comedic way. And he also swore on this album, another F-bomb, which is pretty cool, but the songwriting itself, it's just kind of lackluster, kind of tame. I do kind of like that Chris Martin is trying something different on a Coldplay song, but it just doesn't really work out. I'm feeling a strong 6 to the track. And then afterwards, we have Orphans, the big lead-up single to the album. And even though at first I thought this track is incredibly corny and just campy, this track actually grew on me a lot because this track is essentially one of those very positive, blue skies, rainbow and sunshine pop rock anthems, larger than life. And it actually sounds pretty fun and positive, and I just really love the energy of the track. We get some children's choir group vocals on the track, which is really nice, and it's actually a pretty fun jam. I'm feeling a 7 to an 8 out of 10 on the song. And then afterwards, it is followed with the track Echo, which is, Echo, which is another name for Lagos, the capital of Nigeria. And there are some really gorgeous, lush guitars on the track, and also some pretty vocal duets on the track, but these two things are basically the two only things about the track that I like. Everything about the track is just kind of boring. It's another one of those ballads. 5 out of 10. Afterwards, we have the track Cry, 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 where Coldplay sort of, or more like Chris Martin sort of dabbles into sort of this 50s, 60s, bluesy, jazzy song. There's even vinyl skipping sounds on the entire track. Kind of corny, kind of cheesy, to be honest. And even though the track is semi-catchy, I still think it's a pretty awkward attempt at bluesy jazz. We also have the track Old Friends, which is this really boring, mundane, low-key ballad that totally devoid in anything in terms of flavor or texture. So yeah, Cry 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 is getting a 5 from me, and Old Friends is getting a 3 from me. The track Bonnie Adam, or Children of Adam, is another one of those interludes, except it's weird. It has some weird production and instrumental choices. On the first half, we get some dreamy pianos that are really sweet and nostalgic, and they're gorgeous. They are amazing. And then suddenly in the middle of the track, we just get this constant hi-hat beat, and it just fades in and then fades out towards the end with no rhyme or reason whatsoever, and it just totally doesn't fit with the dreamy pianos at all. It's just such a weird and head-scratching instrumental choice that I'm struggling to enjoy. But the album ends off really solidly with two pretty damn good songs. We have the track Champion of the World, which is another one of those really positive, larger-than-life pop rock songs, except this track is more hooky, more meaty, and it feels more solid. The chorus and the hook are sweet, and the vocal duets with Chris Martin and Will Champion, like the title suggests, pretty amazing. So yeah, it's a really pleasant song, and I'm feeling an 8 out of 10 on the album. And the album ends off with the title track, which starts off with some really warm and beautiful post-rockish instrumentals, post-rock without the rock, more orchestral, sounds like a combination of a really angelic wedding and the default wallpaper of Windows XP, and it's really beautiful. The performances are emotional and passionate, probably the most emotional on the entire album, and I kind of wish that it ends off with a bigger climax, but it's still a really pleasant ending. Yeah, 7 out of 10. So yeah, overall, I'm running out of time here. Overall, I think it's just an okay album. It's here and there. It's a mess. There are a lot of really strange song ideas on the album, which totally makes no sense. Strange production choices, strange instrumental choices. Chris Martin dominates the album, not in a good way. But yeah, that being said, Chris Martin is still one of the nicest and most pretty human beings in the music industry, I have to say. But still, the album just feels tame. It feels harmless. It doesn't really have much in terms of flavor or personality. And while some of the tracks here are pretty pleasant and pretty beautiful, I'm still kind of underwhelmed, all in all. And my favorite track here is Arabesque, and my least favorite is probably either Old Friends or When I Need a Friend. And I'm just feeling a strong 5 to a light 6 on the album. So, have you listened to the latest Coldplay album? From 1 to 10, how much did you rate it? Like it, hate it if you hate it, and subscribe if you want more. Thanks for watching. I have to go eat dinner. Bye.